All right, welcome back to the Topwater Podcast. I am Justin Ellis, and we're going to get down and teaching you guys how to get into some kayak bass fishing tournaments. Let's get into this. Okay, so today I kind of want to make a little bit of a quick announcement, is the fact that this month I have not entered into the KBF Challenge series, mainly because I'm working on something new. And it's not that I'm going to completely abandon tournament fishing, and I want to kind of make that abundantly clear, is the fact that I'm taking a break from it, but it's just so that ways I can develop a different skill. And the different skill is lure making. So I've actually been venturing into making my own soft plastic baits. And hopefully by the end of the month, I'll actually be able to start putting listings up on either like eBay or Facebook Marketplace or something like that in order to actually start selling some of these baits. And I just got a small sampling. These are some of the latest and couple, latest colors, I would assume. But what I have is a crawl mold, is a 3-inch crawl mold, and also a 3-inch swim bait mold. I got other molds on the way, so there's going to be other. Got a little bit of a tag on that one, but yeah, there's going to be more baits on the way. And the colors that I'm going to primarily, I'm going to stick to primarily your basic colors, like your watermelon, your green pumpkin, and like June bug. And I haven't gotten my black color in yet. I still need to order it, I guess. There's a couple of supplies that I still need to order, but I think this is a good way to actually get started and also have the capability of doing laminates, which is actually quite nice. So, like right now I have a green pumpkin. These, like a green pumpkin, I did a green pumpkin in, what is it? What would it be? I would assume it would be like a grape blue or like a straight up more of a purplish blue. But I did it in a green pumpkin laminate. See, right there. I think I'm going to have to zoom in on that camera in order to, hold on. We're going to go tight. There we go. Yeah. Awesome production right here. Professional. But we have one of these guys right there. That's that green pumpkin blue laminate. Those ones are actually kind of harder to do, and I'm probably not going to have laminates of the smaller crawls just because the smaller crawls they don't seem to laminate as well as like the swim baits do. But I also have, as you can see, it's a nice kind of a brighter bluish purple color. I have one there with the chartreuse tips. I'm not sure how well those would do, but they look nice. I like them. But these are the ones that I'm actually really kind of more proud about. These are a better representation of like a bluegill. Yeah, you see how it has that purple bottom with the green pumpkin top. I went ahead and dyed the tip chartreuse. I think these are going to work really well. I have a good feeling about those. I also have them in a more of a brighter blue on the bottom, and a green pumpkin. But the swim baits are a little bit easier to laminate. Those ones are probably going to be more of the laminate products essentially. But yeah, that's what's new coming out of the Topwater side of everything, my side of everything. So that's something to look forward to. I'm glad to actually be able to announce something like that. Is, actually being able to produce something and being able to, have a quality product. And that's another thing is like I'm striving for quality, good looks, good action, and that sort of type of stuff. But that's something to kind of look forward towards maybe like the end of the month, something like that. But that I kind of digress. And I know this has been a little bit of more of an infomercial beginning to most things, but I guess you almost have to take the good with the I wouldn't say bad. I mean, that's still a good thing to actually start producing your own baits and producing your own stuff. And so I want to kind of teach you guys, or at least give you guys a little bit of information on how to actually get into kayak bass fishing and actually get into the world of tournament fishing. And it's kind of scary. It's kind of like getting into fishing when you've never gotten into fishing before, because it's the next level to something. It's kind of the test. How are your skills going to match up against other anglers? And how are you going to adapt to a situation? How are you going to, plan out how you're going to be successful during these tournaments? And it's a little bit overwhelming, and I'm just going to kind of break it down and try to give you guys at least a starting point, and that's really what it is. You need to have some sort of starting point. And I think the best way to start tournament fishing is just to enter into one, and just to get going. And that's why I like these challenge series, because it gives you the ability to be able to fish the tournaments and be able to fish at your own pace, be able to fish at your own lake, be able to fish it basically anywhere you really want. And if you don't have a lot of time, it's good, because then you have a longer period of time to be able to go fishing, because the challenge series is over 3 weeks. I hear everybody saying it's through the whole month, and it's not. It's through 3 weeks, and there's 1 week of basically a break, or no tournaments. And so you really have to kind of strategize for that. But the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you have a fishing license in whatever state that you're fishing in. That's number one. Number one, you have to be legal. And so get the fishing license. If the lake that you're fishing in is a lake to where you would have to pay to have access, or pay to launch there, make sure you pay your fees, that sort of thing. And that's really the first place to start, is just to make sure you're legal and make sure you have your fees paid in order to be able to launch where you want to launch. Or if it's a free spot to be able to launch, then you don't need to pay anything. You just need to show up. But the first thing you need after that, you need to become a KBF member in order to compete into the challenge series. Now, they have the lowest, I think the lowest level is about 20, I think it's $25 a month. Not 25. Sorry, that's wrong. $25 a year. So you pay once a year, $25, and that covers you for the whole year. You also have to, that'll make it to where you're eligible to enter into the kayak bass fishing tournaments. And so when you enter in, you're going to have to get Tourney X. You're going to have to download it onto your phone, which is an app that you can download. And after you get that, you have to go into Tourney X and find your state and the month. You can usually do it on your web browser. That's usually where I do it, is I get onto my computer and I look up, I go into Tourney X, and then I find I find the challenge series that correlates with my state and my month. That's really basically it. And it's a $35 entry fee, and you have to make sure you're entered in before the first of the month. So as long as you're entered in before, the first, you're good to go. And that's pretty much it as far as fees and that sort of stuff. But I highly recommend, and this goes more for all tournaments rather than just this specific tournament, is to make sure you read the rules. Make sure you understand the rules. If you have questions about the rules, get a hold of the tournament director. They're there to be able to answer these questions. They're there for you guys if you have a question about a rule, or you have some sort of inquiry into the tournament or anything like that. They're there for that. They're there to make sure that everything stays fair and that everybody understands and knows the rules. And it's best to ask about the rules, and it's best to ask if you have questions rather than just to assume and then get disqualified. Now, with the challenge series, it is kind of the golden rule. I have come into certain situations to where, I would love to go fish this certain area, but you're not allowed to put into that certain area. So it kind of defeats, if you can't just fish in places that you're not supposed to fish. If it's not an eligible place to fish, then don't fish it, And this is the way I approach this tournament, is fish this tournament like it would be a big tournament. So one of the positive things about the KBF Challenge Series is that when you enter in these tournaments and you place and you keep winning or you keep placing in certain spots, you constantly get points. And the more points you get, it adds you into the rankings. So whenever you actually, at the end of the year, they have a big tournament. They have, the championship, the Challenge Series championship, essentially. I don't know if that's necessarily what it's called, but that's essentially what it is. It's the championship. And I believe it's the top 25%. The top 25% of the people in the nation get to go to, I'm pretty sure it's Guntersville in Alabama, and they get to fish Guntersville in a big tournament, which there's a giant cash prize, the whole nine. It's one of your bigger tournaments, especially for the Challenge Series people. This is the biggest tournament you're going to be able to be eligible to get into. But that kind of incentivizes you to keep fishing the tournaments over and over and over again, because you may be able to enter into the Guntersville tournament and be able to go down there and win a big tournament, But it's all about being able to hone your skills, and it's all about being able to hone your tournament skills. And by doing that, by honing those skills, then you can just pretty much graduate to a little bit bigger tournaments, maybe local tournaments, some other type of kayak fishing tournaments, to where you can actually win stand to win a little bit of cash, and have some fun on the weekends, and just have a little bit of community interaction with other people. So it's a really good thing to be able to do something like that. Now, when it comes down to the equipment, because you're going to have equipment. I mean, of course, if you're entering into a kayak fishing tournament, you're going to have some sort of kayak. Now, this kind of goes back into the rules and regulations and asking people about the rules and different things that you can, what is allowed and what isn't allowed, because some tournaments don't allow any sort of electronic or motorized propulsion. So anybody with, let's say, an Old Town autopilot, they'd be able to enter into the tournament, but they wouldn't be able to use the motor. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, that there are a lot of tournaments out there to where you can't have any sort of propulsion device other than human propulsion. So whether it be a pedal drive or a paddle or something like that, so that's why I say always read the rules, understand the rules, and if you have a question, make sure you ask. So the first things first, the equipment that you need is imperative. So there's a couple of things that you must have. You must have safety equipment. That's the first and foremost thing. When it comes down to these tournaments, they're always about safety, 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 safety. They want people to be safe in their tournaments. They want people to come out and be able to enjoy their tournament and be able to fish it and be able to be done, leave, and come back. I mean, that's the whole point of these things, for people to come out and fish these things and then to come back and fish them again. And without having proper safety equipment and proper safety regulations, then there's going to be a lot of mishaps. There's going to be people that end up, losing their life, and that's not good for tournament fishing. That's just bad. So you need safety equipment, and the first thing that you really need is a PFD. Now, when I bought my PFD, the first one I bought was a Bass Pro, like just a straight up Bass Pro brand, $35, life jacket. It wasn't very expensive. It did what you needed it to do. It was a life jacket, essentially. And if you're getting out on some of these lakes where you have heavy boat traffic, then obviously you'll want to have a PFD for sure. I mean, I just don't feel comfortable going out to places like Stockton Lake, for example, without some sort of PFD. For one thing, the waters get kind of rough around there because of the wind, and also there's a lot of boat traffic. And because of that boat traffic, it kind of makes you a little bit uneasy, but you do get comfortable being around boats, and it's not that big of a deal, but as long as you're being safe. But I went ahead and upgraded my PFD a little bit while back when I first started doing these tournaments, just because when I would sit in my kayak with the Bass Pro brand PFD, it would just raise up. So it would be like up here in my neck, and be rubbing on my neck because of the seat that I was in, because it would slide up, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It's uncomfortable. And if you're fishing for a whole 8 hours, you want to be comfortable. If you're fishing from morning to dark, you want to be comfortable. And that's why I went with something like the NRS. I went with the NRS PFD. And I have to say, I really like this thing. This right here is... I'm just going to lay it down on them. I like this thing. And the reason why I like it is really mainly because of all the different little pockets, the little inserts, all that sort of stuff. I have a place where I have, I can put my multi-tool in there, which I always recommend to have some sort of multi-tool. I have my line cutting device. It's just a utility knife. I like it just because it has that little insert right there to where you can just cut the line quickly if you're trying to retie really quick. Now, it also has pockets to where you can actually stick your phone or something like that in there. I usually stick my keys, my phone. I have a Sharpie just in case I need to Sharpie something. But yeah, that's my PFD setup, and I like it because of this back piece. This back piece is high enough up to where it sits on top of the kayak seat, and there's nothing underneath it, so it kind of sits flush, and it's rather comfortable. I can wear this thing all day. Now, some people might complain about it during like hot weather, warm weather, something like that, to where you're wearing this thing and it's hot. Well, if that's kind of the case, then go with an inflatable. The inflatable ones are lower profile. They're generally lighter, not as cumbersome, not as bulky, but they don't have all the different little pockets. They don't have all the different little accessory places to put your stuff. And I for one, like to wear shorts whenever I go fishing. And the type of shorts I wear are gym shorts. They're generally light. They dry quickly. They breathe well, so it keeps me cool. And the only problem with those is phones and wallets and keys and all those sorts of different things tend to fall out of my pockets. So I don't like having stuff inside my pockets, and this is nice because I can actually stick all the stuff and still keep it on me, which, I mean, I would guess, I should probably I usually put my keys down into the, there's a little cubby hole that's a watertight cubby hole that I usually stick my keys into just in case I do tip over. But with the NRS, I can actually just keep them in there and zipped up. If they get wet, and that sucks, but, keys will dry. The only unfortunate thing is, like, my phone would be destroyed. But, if you're going out of your kayak, it's better to buy a new phone than it is to not be able to buy a phone again. So, I mean, that's just kind of what it comes down to, is you're going to need some sort of PFD. And with the PFD, you're also going to need some sort of sonic device. Get some, like a whistle, just a whistle. It's pretty simple, just a whistle. And another thing is if you're going to be fishing tournaments to where you're going to have to launch during the morning, like 5:30, 6. If you have a launch time at 5:30, obviously it's going to be dark. And if it's going to be dark, you're going to have lights. So that's the red and green lights on the front and the light pole in the back. You're going to have to just have some of those. Or if you're fishing some sort of a night tournament, you're going to have those. That's just it's non-negotiable. These are kind of non-negotiable things that you have to have. And the next thing that you need when it comes down to actually starting to do tournament fishing is you're going to need some sort of measuring board. Now, with the kayak bass fishing tournaments, they have a few companies that they are eligible to measure with. So there's a couple. I think the Hog Trough is one of them, and the Catch Board is another one. Personally, I like the Catch Board. Yeah. But I like the Catch Board. And the reason why I like the Catch Board is because this is aluminum. Now, a lot of people usually cut their catch boards down. I haven't cut mine down yet. I've been thinking about it, and I've been, debating whether or not to do it. But I don't know. I kind of like having the longer board. It's just kind of nice. But that's essentially it right there, the catch board, if I'm not going to bump my mic. So, boom, you can see this is, and it has this little rubber piece on the back, and the fish just sit right in there. You're also going to need an identifier. That's another thing you're going to need, because when you measure the fish, each tournament has a special identifier. It's usually randomly picked, but it has to be into the photo. So you have to have some sort of identifier. I'm just screwing this all up today. But some sort of identifier into the photo. And the identifier has to be present, and it has to be visible. So if you have glare off of it, it doesn't count if you can't see the actual number. So that's another thing to kind of understand understand about the tournaments. Now, you don't have to have it to where it is like on there like this. Now, a lot of people do it like that. Some people have it to where it's sitting off of there like this. And that's not a bad way to go either. And I've actually thought about actually changing mine up to where it's actually sitting off and not back here, because I have a hard time sometimes. And sometimes when I take the photo, I'll be a little bit off this way and I'll barely get the identifier in. So that's something to really kind of make sure. And, you can go to like Fish USA. You can go to Amazon. You can just buy these little like pocket deals in order to be able to put your identifier in there. It just has to be in there somewhere, into the photo. Which, that's pretty much it when it comes down to the things that you absolutely have to have. You absolutely have to have. I mean, you also have to have, of course, rods and baits. And as far as the rods and baits, that's usually just regulation. It's usually just regulation of your of whatever hunting and game fishing organization that you have in your state, whatever they say is legal. So if they say no more than 3 hooks on a bait, then you can't be fishing A-rigs. But if you live in a place where they allow A-rigs and other things, and also certain tournaments don't allow A-rigs. So that's another thing. If you love fishing A-rigs and you're really good at fishing them, sometimes they go, hey, you can't fish an A-rig into this tournament. So that's always something that you have to make sure you just read the rules, read them again, and if you don't understand them, ask the tournament director. It's better to ask a question than to get disqualified, essentially. But another big game changer, and I there for a little bit, I thought, I'm not going to need a net. I had a net earlier, but I had to end up cutting out a jerkbait out of my net. I caught like a 3-4 pound bass. It was a nice bass in the wintertime. And I ended up having to cut it out. So I had these huge giant holes in my net. And it's just like, if I get a big fish, it's just going to tear right through that net because there's a whole bunch of holes in it now since I had to cut a jerkbait out of there. So I was like, okay, well, screw it. I don't need a net. I can just boat flip these things or just get them out of the water. I mean, I'm sitting down. Sometimes I'm sitting down. I can sit down pretty quick, and get a fish. But I have lost more big fish because of not having a net. And that's kind of a bummer, especially when it comes down to fishing these tournaments. Man, I could have landed a couple of fish that would have been really solid fish. Now, what I recommend when it comes down to getting a net, and I bought one of these, and it's like $30-$40, something like that, on like Amazon or something. But this right here is a rubber net. This is all rubber right here. And I like that rubber. And the reason why I like that rubber is because your hooks don't get caught up into it as often. And you're actually able to dip the fish without worrying about, hooking your net and having to cut it out. And also, it's a lot easier to get your bass out of the net and get your hooks out of the net a lot quicker. You can, and I think the rubber, I'm not sure, but I think the rubber's a little bit better on the fish. But yeah, just having something like that, and you can actually use the net. And what I've started doing is when I measure the fish, because when you measure the fish, you have to put your hand on the fish. Well, you don't have to put your hand on the fish, but I like to put my hand on the fish because sometimes they get a little buck, they get a little wild, and they like to jump around and hop off there and get back into the water. So whenever you're cupping the fish, sometimes they get away from you. And if they get away from you, they usually go out. They're trying to go out. And I've had some pretty decent fish just boop and off into the water. I mean, not decent, but like a 14-inch bass or something like that, and just bucking off into the water. Because you're in a kayak, it's not like a giant boat or anything, So one of the things I've been doing is when I measure the fish, I'll stick the net underneath my thigh where I'm measuring the fish. So that way, if it bucks off into this direction, it'll just buck off into the net. So it makes it to where if for some reason I lose control of the fish, which does happen, and it happens to everybody, it's not something. At first I thought, this is going to be easy. I'll be able to just, and then we're good to go. It's not that simple because those fish can be finicky. And if those fish are troublesome, it's kind of hard to deal with. And if sometimes you might just lose a big bass, and sometimes it sucks. It sucks to lose a big fish. So that's kind of a little bit of a tip when it comes down. And make sure when you are measuring the fish, make sure the fish is facing left. So basically, the top is facing away from you, the bottom is facing you. So the top of the fish is facing away. The fish has to be nose up against the bump board. Like it has to be all the way nose up against the bump board. And it has to be tail laid flat. So not only is it has to be flat. It can't be curled up. So if you get a fish that keeps curling his back fin up, you just have to keep laying it down and trying to get your picture. And another thing is make sure you don't put your finger into the gill plate. That's a no-no. They'll disqualify the photo because of that if your finger's inside the gill plate. So after you take the photo, either put them on a lip gripper or, I usually just put them back into the water and scroll through. Like I don't release them, but I hold them in the water with my hand, and I'll sit there and scroll through and make sure that I have the photo that I actually need. Because if you don't have the photo that you need, if your photo is blurry or you didn't get your identifier in there, or maybe there's glare onto your identifier and you can't actually read it, that's not good. So you have to make sure that the photo is good, because as soon as you release that fish, it's over. You don't get another opportunity to take a picture. So if you have a big fish, if you have, a 20-inch bass, you're gonna want to make sure you got a good photo. So make sure you have a good photo. Take the time, look at it. Okay, if you have it, solid, release the fish. He's good to go. She's good to go. And, you're off to the next bass. You're off to the next, addition to the length of your tournament. That's what we're doing, That's how you're going to win, is essentially just that sort of process. And you have to get used to that process. And it doesn't seem like it's hard, but it's not overly complicated. It's one of those things that you kind of have to do it a couple times before you start getting good at it and before you start seeing mistakes. Kind of like for one, let's see if I'm pretty sure I have it in my pictures. Let's go over here. Maybe it might be in downloads. Yeah. So this is a good example of I guess it doesn't want to record here. All right. So, right here in the photo that I'm showing you, you can see that the fish is all the way up against the bump board. You can see the hands on the fish, not inside the gill plate. And you can see that it's a 17.5-inch fish. It's touching that last it's kind of touching. It's there, it's close enough to where I say it's there. But you can also see the identifier. And this was the last month's KBF challenge that I actually entered in. I placed 6th with, I think I had 78 3/4 on that bass tournament. But this is one of the things that I can tell you as far as, looking at this picture, kind of a hindsight 2020, is if you see where the bump board is, see how much space there is between the edge of the bump board and the edge of the photo. Well, that amount of space will ultimately kind of, in a way, screw you over. Because if you have anything that's anything longer than 20 inches, because you can see right here, it's already hitting the edge of the photo. And this is just a 17.5-inch fish. So if I were to get my identifier in there with a 20-inch fish onto the bump board, onto the measuring board that I have, I would have to hold the camera over more. And that's something that's a technique that I'm going to have to work on, especially with this month. I'm going to work on taking photos and work on that sort of thing, making sure that when I take a photo of a fish, that I'm able to take a photo of a 20-inch fish, or I'm able to take a photo of a 21-inch fish, because those fish are the ones that are going to win you the tournaments, especially in the KBF Challenge series. Since it's a month long, you don't have to really worry about just getting a limit. Getting a limit should come pretty easy. Even if you only have 3 days to fish out of the whole month, you can catch 5 bass in 3 days out of a whole month. It's not hard to do. But that's one of the things that I do want to point out is that sort of space. So make sure that when you're photographing, it does have to be top down, but you can adjust it over. It doesn't have to be directly over the fish. It can be off to the side. As long as the fish is in there, you can see that it's clearly touching the bump, the bump, and you can also see clearly where it's being measured at. And this is a little bit blurry of a photo, but it's not so bad to where you can't read anything and you can't, see how big the fish is. So I just kind of wanted to point that out and just kind of like get you guys a good understanding of what all you kind of need to do as far as taking the photo. So, I mean, that's just kind of, what it is. Now, when it comes down to kayak bass fishing, you do have to have a plan, some sort of strategy. Now, you may not be utilizing that plan or following through that plan throughout the whole entire month or throughout the whole entire day, just because, weather happens, time of the year happens. Sometimes we get cold snaps, sometimes you get rainstorms, sometimes you get thunderstorms. And right now we've had a hurricane that came through, which has dumped a lot of rain here in Missouri. So, we have high water. So that's going to change a lot of stuff as far as like the fish behavior, where they're going to be positioned, what are they doing at this point in time. So really what it comes down to is planning, strategy, and setup. So when it comes down to planning, one of the things I like to do is I like to look at Google Earth Pro. And Google Earth Pro is a really nice application to be able to actually get a good satellite image of where you're trying to fish. And one of the cool things about it is it allows you to be able to go back in time to see different photos from different years. So you'll be able to see it on, windy days is kind of hard to really tell anything, but you can, I guess, get a better idea of what's going on. Sometimes you can find mud lines. You can find deep spots. You can also find, grass, laydowns, rocks, rock piles, other stuff like that. And during low waters, it actually exposes some of the stuff on the bank. Like back in 2011, we had a drought year, and a lot of the photos that I find through 2011 typically are low water photos. So it's kind of a handy tool to be able to find things on Google, on Google. It's really one of the first places I would actually start is there. Because in reality, like this whole entire tournament, I probably fished. Let's go yards on this one. Where I caught fish this whole entire tournament was about a 640-yard stretch. And that was it. Just one little stretch, and that was it. That's where I caught the bulk of my fish. I think actually the majority of them. So yeah. I mean, that's not that far of a stretch. It's a big stretch, but it's not the largest stretch in the world. Now, if we look at this, what I can tell right here is that there's a couple of key things that are happening here. For one thing, I should probably... No. It's not wanting to... Boom. All right. Now I'm screen recording. Ha! New techniques. All right. So this is that stretch right here. That's that stretch. And it says 632. I guess whatever. But right around that sort of spot. Now, that area, there's a couple of key things in that area that really kind of makes it a good spot. For one thing, if I scroll down a little bit, here's the lake. This is, Springfield Lake, or Lake Springfield. It's a really small lake. It's like 318 acres. It's not big at all. It might as well be a pond. It's like a big pond. But this right here is the mouth of the creek. Let's see if I can pull up some. Is there 98? Oh, well. But essentially, this is the mouth of the river. Well, not the mouth. Yeah, the mouth of the river where it dumps into the lake. So you're going to get a lot of churning at this point because this is where the water starts slowing down. Now, right above that, you get this sort of path. And that's where I was fishing. But what's nice about that, or what's good about that area, is you have two creeks that run off and connect into this area. So you get two bodies of water that are connecting to the river, that's connecting to the mouth of the lake. Now, this area right here is a very nice area because here's a good thing. There's not a lot of wind. Wind does get up through there, but this right here, this little angle, creates a good wind break. So typically through here, it's a lot calmer water. It's deeper, calmer water. And there's one more factor, is that there is a lot of rock. There's basically huge chunk rock, huge basically bluff wall sort of style of type of fishing right along that sort of northwestern side of the bank. And on the other side, you get more of a tapering flat, and there's also more of like pea gravel rock sort of stuff on that side. And of course, there's some laydowns, there's some other stuff. You get some trees and brush hanging off into the water that they'll hold to. But all throughout this stretch, there are just shad balls moving up and down that stretch. And then once you get past that stretch and you start coming around that corner and going back up into the James, it turns to mud. And you can I think this is actually I think this photo was taken whenever there was a heavy rain upstream, because you can see it clearly goes from mud to not so muddy to clear. So I think this is a mud line that's pushing through this spot. Either that or these are two different photos that are actually being put together. One's of one time and another's of a different time. You never know. But it is imperative to understand that through this spot, it changes from a rocky area to a muddy area. And as soon as I went from the rocky area to the muddy area, the fishing just died off. So venturing past this point, no go. Venturing, and if I were to actually fish the actual lake, then you start fishing, then you're looking at grass and lily pads, topwater, punching, that sort of stuff. Even though the punch rig came into play on that little stretch, the thing is on that little stretch, I couldn't get bit off of a jig to save my life. For some reason, they don't want something with a skirt. I think they really have gotten acclimated to things with skirts. And the reason why is this is a heavily fished area. This is a heavily pressured area. There's a lot of weakened kayakers that come out here. There's a lot of people that are first-time kayakers. They rent kayaks to where you can actually go up the James and float up the James and come back. So there's a lot of people that go out onto this lake, and there's a lot of baits being tossed at these fish, and I think they see a lot of skirts, they see a lot of jigs, and they see a lot of that sort of type of stuff, and it's kind of hard to get them to bite off of that sort of type of thing. So the majority of my fish came off of this guy. Oop, hit my rods. Right there. That punch rig. I know I have a trench hog on there, but, I cycle through the trench hog to the bandito bug to the rage bug, just essentially anything with a fairly decent amount of action, but black and blue. Black and blue seem to be the way to go 100% of the time. So, I mean, that's just kind of something that I've kind of picked up on with this lake, even though that it's sometimes can clear up. Natural colors don't seem to work very well there. And I think that just has to do with the fact that they're just probably chasing bluegill and, that sort of type of thing. I mean, white and pearl, or like a pearl white, that seems to do really well there. But yeah, it's a nice little stretch, and I tend to catch fairly decent sized bass there. I've caught some 4s, some 5s, and, that's how it, I mean, I've also caught everything from, like, a 12-inch, you catch some small fish, and you'll also get schooling fish feeding on shad, on the balls of shad. But generally, the bass don't typically, the big bass typically aren't in those schools. They're typically up onto some sort of structure and just sitting there and just waiting for a big meal just to come by. And that's why I've been catching them off of sort of bluegill colored baits and that sort of type of thing. But that was kind of the strategy going into this, is to figure out that. But I figured it out by actually, putting the kayak in the water and fishing that spot. And it wasn't until I actually pulled up Google Earth Pro that I could actually see why that is. I can actually see the features, what actually moves into that area, and why the fish are actually holding there. And that's actually, like I said, this is a really good resource for that. So let's take a trip. We're going to go to Fellows Lake. This is a lake that I actually want to start learning how to fish more. I fished it a few different times. I pretty much just junked fish and, caught 1 or 2. I haven't caught too many. But if we go here, and this is an interesting place to me, because this is completely opposite of Springfield Lake. Springfield Lake is a smaller lake. It's a river system lake. It's a lake that has a river system tied directly into it, and it's a much more substantial river system. And this lake here, you can't actually fish into the river system that's pushing into it. So they don't want you fishing. They don't want you to put your kayak there and fish up there, which kind of sucks, but, you got to play by the rules. That's kind of part of playing by the rules. So if I zoom in, I'm going to keep zooming in, and we're also going to go view historical imagery. We're going to go back to 2000. That's 2015. 2011. All right. So, if I zoom in, I got to zoom in a lot, because it's kind of hard to see. It is kind of getting a little pixelated. Let's pan camera so that way it's down. But I notice, I could probably zoom out just a little bit, but I notice if I take the little ruler bar, I'll just kind of stick this off into the corner. I'll put it in a different corner. But if I draw a line right here, all right there are these little black dots. Same going down here. So there's these little black dots going all around there. And what I believe these black dots are stumps. I think these are stumps. Or they're something, but they're in a line that is paralleling the bank. So that's the reason why I think they're stumps. And you can kind of see them. I mean, they're a little hard to see, but they're these like little shaded areas and these little shaded spots. But you can tell that they're in the water, and they're about They're about 10 yards off of the bank. So about 10 yards off the bank, I'm seeing these little I'm seeing a stump line. Now that's interesting to me. Now, what I think is that bass will probably sit down onto those stumps. Now, I'm not really sure how deep it is right there, but I do believe that it's shallow enough to where they're gonna to where I'd be able to actually fish for them. Let me get rid of this ruler. Close that. And there's also there's a couple of other things, like I'm seeing like another kind of blemish here that could be like a rock pile or a submerged brush or whatever it is. I think it's probably more of a rock pile. But this is the interesting thing, is there's a point. I found this point. You can see it's kind of this tapering point. But there's this structure. It almost looks like a house foundation. Because that's what it looks like to me, is a house foundation. So you get a transition of rock. So it looks like some pea gravel to more chunk rock. But there's this thing that's out in the water. And I'm pretty sure that thing is also a house foundation. I think that's going to be a good place to mark and to figure that out where that actually is. And if I bring out the handy dandy ruler, let's see. To the center of it. So that's about 45 yards. So 45 yards off of the bank, that's going to be a good spot to actually check out, because I think that is actually going to hold fish, because there's nothing like that in this lake at all other than that dude right there. Either that or it's like a submerged dock or a sunken dock or something like that. Either way, that's something to actually, take note of. And, another key area that I'm going to actually fish, and this is all within the same little area on Fellows Lake, is there's a little like pocket in this cove. And what's interesting about this is you have this lip that runs from one bank to the other. So you can obviously see it here, this lip right here. And I would bet, if I was a betting man, I would bet that there would be fish that are staged up on the inner points and the outer points here. And also possibly right here, right over that hump. That whole hump, I want to take my time and just fish that hump. But that's going to be an area that I think is also going to hold fish. That's a key area. That's a high percentage area. You can also see some other stuff off in the water. It looks like some more stumps, some other things. There's also some rock changes to where you have like pea gravel into a little bit more of a chunk rock. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at whenever it comes down to fishing these areas. And here's another thing. This is something I found funny. If I just fast forward it to the next year, to the next photo, 2013, that hump, you can see there's a boat on that. There's a boat fishing that hump. So that's something to actually kind of take note of. It's actually kind of cool that the satellite actually caught that. So that, I think, is going to be a pretty key area in order to be able to catch some fish. Now, I don't know the size of the fish that are going to be there. They could be small. They could be just regular, have-nots. And it could be anything. Could be walleye. Could be pike. But I think the biggest thing for me is to fish this stump line off of that point, fish that foundation, and to go fish that hump as well. And I think I can probably fish all three of them within one day, but I'm not really sure. We'll figure that part out. So, yep, that is gonna do it for the kayak bass fishing video. And I think that's I think it's a good thing to get into kayak bass fishing. I think it's a good thing to be able to test yourself, and I think it's a good thing to be able to make it to where you push yourself in a way that you're not normally pushed. And it gives you the opportunity to win some money, to win some cash. And hey, everybody loves winning money. Everybody loves winning cash, and sometimes there's prizes, and other things like that, big bass. And also, it's just fun to get into tournament fishing. The people that fish these tournaments are pretty cool people. So, generally pretty cool people. Most of them. You're always going to get the occasional bad egg, but oh well. We can forgive. That's the way it is. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off and work on getting some videos edited and getting some baits made and other things like that, and working on my colors on my baits. But that's something to look forward to later on in the month. And another thing is just get out there and get into the fishing world. Get out there and get into some tournaments. Heck, you can even get a couple of friends together, all throw $10 into a pot and just be like, winner takes all. Or winner takes, 80% and second place takes 20%. That sort of thing. Or you can just do, something like that, You can always just have fun doing these tournaments, and you can always have fun fishing. It's fun to play for stakes. So, yeah. Well, I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a great night. You guys, gals, have a great night too. Everybody have a great night, because I'm going to have one as well. I'll see you out on the water. Peace.